All right, the next step is after learning the steps of the proportion equation, what happens when you have to apply it to word problems? How do you apply it? How do you use it? That's a very important question. Um, I want to go ahead and give you a small demonstration, and then we're going to apply it to a word problem. Okay, so how I want to describe it is let's draw the proportion equation one more time, where it looks like it's a fraction and it's equal to another fraction. Now, how I want to describe this is when you apply it, the first thing that you have to worry about is building it correctly. Sorry, spelled that wrong. Let me spell it one more time. You have to build it correctly. And what I mean by build it is, let's call this slot 1, slot 2, slot 3, and slot 4. So you know that when you use the proportion equation, you actually have 4 spaces, right? And because this is the proportion equation, one of them is going to be a missing. I'm going to go ahead and put X. There's a missing. So there's going to be 4 spots. One of them is going to have the variable for the missing. Now, let's talk about how you build this thing, okay? So you'll notice that there are equal signs, right? Okay, so what it means is what's on the left is equal to what's on the right, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and describe this to you when you build this, okay? You'll notice that you have slot 1, okay? Now, slot 1 and slot 3, whatever you decide to put there, they have to be the same item. And what I mean is this: if I've been given inches and I use inches up here on the top right for slot 1, then over on slot 3, this also has to be inches. For instance, for example, okay? The same is also true of slot 2 and 4. And I'm just talking about how we build these. I'm going to give you another example, and you're going to get to see this in action, and hopefully it'll make sense. But I just want to kind of get you started right now. And let's go ahead and talk about this. So if slot 2 is feet, and I'm just saying this is our ratio, 4 inches equals 20 feet, whatever they tell us. And we're going to use the proportion equation. Well, when we build it, we have to build it a certain way. So slot 2 and 4, they both have to be feet. Because remember, what's on the left has to equal what's on the right, which means their position on the fraction in the equation, it matters. It matters because remember, you're going to go through certain steps. You're going to cross multiply and then you're going to divide. So you need to make sure that what the items that you put in each spot, they match each other. Okay. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to erase all this, and I want to go ahead and go to an example. That way we can use an example and you can understand this slot 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I'll do it again for you. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to an example. Okay, and I want to go ahead and talk about this one here with Kyle can buy 30 apples for $8. You'll notice that it's already been applied, or this information's been placed into the proportion equation. See that? They've already cross multiplied and solved. I want to do it again. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to recreate this, and you should do this with me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to recreate this, except I'm going to leave everything blank. Okay, and I'm going to call it slot 1, 2, 3, and 4, just like I did in the previous example. And it's going to look like what this looks like, except I'm going to explain to you why the 30 is in slot 1, why the 8 is in slot 2. Okay, so let's go ahead and describe this. Okay, all right, here we go. So again, we have one fraction, and it's going to be equal to another fraction. And I've labeled each missing slot as slot 1, 2, 3, 4. So we can talk like that. And you can have, your eyes can be placed at a certain location when I'm talking. All right, let me tell you how to fill this out. Okay, so what happens is this. I'll tell students, I'll say, hey, let's go ahead and read this. It says Kyle can buy 30 apples for $8. Okay, and I'll say, hey, Do you see this here? This is your first ratio. And I'll tell students, I'm going to say, hey, you got your first ratio, right? They gave it to you. It's going to go in slot 1 and 2. Okay, I tell them that. I say the first ratio that they give you, you put it in slot number 1 and slot number 2. And I'll tell them this, and they'll say, well, Darren, what goes where? And I'll say, okay, here's the thing. So we have 30 apples for $8. I'll say, do you see the first item? The first item was 30 apples. I'll say, whatever was given first, that goes in slot 1. So they'll say, okay, so I should put the 30 there. And I say, yeah, put the 30, but it's not the 30 that's important. It's what it's called. And they'll say, what do you mean? I'll say, well, it's apples, right? And they'll say, yeah. I'll tell them that's what's important. It's not the fact that it's 30. It's the fact that it's apples. Remember in the previous example where I said, hey, slot 1 and slot 3 have to match? Okay, this is where I'm applying that same information right now, because this is it. Because the 30, which is apples, is in slot 1, if they give me any other information about apples, it has to go in slot 3, because slot 3 has to match slot 1. It has to also be apples. So this is why and where things go. Okay, let's reverse. Again, students will say, Darren, okay, the first ratio was 30 apples for $8. And I'll say, exactly. And I'd say, what goes in slot 1? And they'll say, the 30. I'll say, why? Because it was first. I'd say, exactly. So you know 30 apples is going to go in the first slot. And I'll say, what goes in slot number 2? They'll say, what's the rest of it? The $8. And I'll say, yeah, put that part with it, because it goes with it. Okay. So 30 apples is $8, right? 30 apples for $8. Okay. Now here's the thing. You remember in the previous example, I told you slot 2 and slot 4 also have to match. Well, that's true here. So because I'm putting dollars in slot 2, dollars also has to be in slot 4. So if they give me any more information that has to do about dollars, that information is going to go in slot 4. So I'm already designating. So with the first ratio, 30 apples for $8. With that information, I knew what to go in slot 1 and what goes in slot 2. It's also, by me putting it in something in slot 1 and slot 2, it's also telling me what goes in slot 3, which has to match apples, and what goes in slot 4, which also has to match dollars. Now I can continue to read the rest of the information. Whatever information they gives me, I already know if it's going to go in slot 1 or slot 3 or slot 4. I already know if it goes on the top because it would be apples. I know whether it goes on the bottom because it would be dollars. And they tell me how many apples can he buy for $2. So they give me the information, $2. It's dollars. I know it's dollars. So it has to match, and dollars go on the bottom. So 2 is going to go here. So remember I told you, of the 4 slots, one of them is going to be missing, right? One of them is going to equal the missing information. And here's the thing. They want to know how many apples he can buy, right? And so the missing information is apples. That's why this top slot over here was left blank, or put the variable, is because it matches the apples that was on the left, apples on the right. It's missing. And now I know why 30 is on top, 8 is on bottom, and why now I know X is on top, 2 is on bottom. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, and we're going to go ahead. I'm going to zoom out a bit so you can still see the previous example. And we're going to take a look at example number 2. Okay, so I want you to go ahead and read this. Okay, notice we didn't solve. I don't care about solving. What I'm going to do is build the ratio, build the proportion equation, slot 1, 2, 3, and 4. I want you to read the sentence, and I want you to decide what goes in slot 1, put it there, slot 2, 3, and 4. I want you to build the math problem. You're going to build the proportion equation. You're going to build it, and don't worry about solving it, because if everything is placed correctly, you will eventually just go through your steps, which are cross multiply, then divide, and now you will have your answer. But if it's not placed correctly, you will not solve correctly. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video, and let's see if we match each other. Okay, are you back? All right, here we go. So while working at Dell, Sarah found 10 defects in 30 microchips. Given this rate, how many defects will she find in 1,200 microchips? Okay, so here we go. So I'd say, okay, my friends, did you get the first ratio? And they'd say, yes, the first ratio is 10 defects in 330 microchips. So I'd say, yeah, okay, so because that's the first ratio, that, remember, that's going to go in slot 1 and 2. And I'd say, okay, good. What goes in slot 1? Did you put 10 defects? You should just go ahead and automatically put that first, because it's first, right? It was the first piece of the information given, the first piece of the ratio. So go ahead and put it in slot 1. What's great about that is it kind of makes the decision for you. You make a decision in the first step easily. I know 10 defects goes there. So if they give me any more defects, they're going to go there in slot 3. The next piece of information is going to be the 330. I'd say exactly. And I'd say, where does it go? You'd say, well, it's the 10 defects and 300. It's the part of the first ratio. So it's going to go right below the 10. And I'd say exactly. So my 330 is going to go here, because those are the number of microchips. So again, because I know microchips is on the bottom in slot 2, it's also going to be whatever. If they give me any more microchips, they're going to go in slot 4. So then I'd say, okay, then it says, given this rate, how many defects will you find in 1,200 microchips? So because they gave me 1,200 microchips, that is microchips. So it has to go in slot 4. That is 1,200 microchips. So I'd say, what's missing? You'd say the number of defects. That's going to go here. So I'd say, great. Now, if this is confusing to you and you're like, hey, Varen, do I have to write all the words? I'm like, no, you don't have to write the words. If you have 10 of 330 is the same as x of 1,200, then we are correct. We are the same. And that's exactly what I wanted to see. Now, I added the language and the words. Why did I do that? Because I'm a conscientious instructor, and I want to make sure that we understand that it's not the numbers that are special. It's the name of those items that is special. Okay. So again, you want to go ahead and practice this way, do a few more examples, and it should be no problem. Just remember the first ratio that they've given you, that goes in slot 1 and 2. And then whatever goes in slot 3 and 4 is going to match exactly what happened in slot 1 and 2. Okay. Good luck with everything.